Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to the nifty old nichecast. We are recording this on the 6th of August. Big up to everyone around Aotearoa and around the whole wide world. Anyone who loves a bit of Aotearoa sporting matters, that's all we do. We just chat sport, we write about sport, we think about sport, then we just do sport. Specifically Aotearoa sport, because we don't really care about any other country or any other sporting matters. All we care about is Aotearoa sport. And this is the nichecache, www.theniche-cache.com. That's where you can find the deep dives, the big yarns, but you can also hit us up on our newsletter, thenichecache.substack.com. That comes out every Monday and Friday. Big yarns every Monday and Friday full of Aotearoa sporting information. We just like to flesh it out, bit of brainstorming, and then we come at you on the podcast with some more concentrated ideas. We get the diluted raro on a Monday and Friday newsletter. We work through the weekend sport, and then we come at you with the concentrate straight at you on a Tuesday podcast. And if you are signed up to the newsletter via Substack, or you are part of the Patreon whānau, you can then access our bonus podcast every week, recording on a Thursday, the subscriber podcast. So if you have a paid newsletter subscription via Substack, the subscriber podcast is sent out straight through there. And if you're a member of the Patreon whānau, not only do you get the whole newsletter copied into Patreon the next day, you also get the access to the subscriber podcast. So there are two easy mahi ways to support us straight up the guts. Patreon.com/EL Nichecache, thenichecache.substack.com. Completely free to sign up to the Monday and Friday newsletter. Then you can upgrade to a paid subscription, and then if you're feeling a bit generous and you want to make a donation, you can also hit us up on Buy Me a Coffee if that's your buzz as well. Big up to everyone who has tapped in through Buy Me a Coffee. It all helps us do what we love to do, and just but Aotearoa sport, that's all we love to do, really. So we're out here doing our best. Pretty hectic show coming up for one main reason, and we'll dive into that in a jiffy. But first, I definitely need to bring myself grounded, bring myself back down to earth, because I've been off in the mangroves for a couple of days, just pondering some Aotearoa Warriors matters. So now I need a bit of grounding before we go deep back into the mangroves to chat about some Aotearoa Warriors matters. What do you got?
Well, is there mangroves a little bit more like sludgy and mud and kind of thing? Do you get sand in the mangroves ever? It's probably got a different probably got a different name if you got in the sandy what do you call them,
yeah, it's called
the
a
marshes
beach.
or whatnot. Yeah, beach.
Yeah.
And the beach. Well, no, the beaches often lead into the mangroves, but
That's
I think
the
there's a
thing.
cutoff point before that. However, we'll still make this one. We'll still make this one stretch out from your trip into the mangroves. The more you squeeze, and this is actually I forgot to say, this is an unattributed quote. I don't know who said it. Just one of them proverbs, you know.
So
The
usually
more
that means you made it up.
No, it means someone else made it up and I copied it. You know, I don't make them up.
Yeah,
I
but
don't have that level of wisdom.
I think when it's we can stretch this out to a running joke throughout all Nichecast episodes. When you deliver an unattributed mindfulness, maybe you just made it up, and it's all right. Like, I actually like that. I actually prefer it, so it's all right.
Well, it's like folk songs, you know. Is someone, you know, some Bob Dylan will claim he wrote it. He didn't write it. He just took the song that nobody else had claimed and said, "Well, if you don't want it, I'll have it." You know, it's like that. I didn't write it, but I'm claiming copyrights on it. Um, as it goes, the more you squeeze, the more sand falls through your fingers.
Classical divine masculine energy there. The more effort you put in, the more you try to control it, the more sand that just drips out of your fingertips. I will say, if you go deep into the mangroves, if you go deep enough, you end up at the beach, right?
Yeah, in one direction. If you
Yeah.
go in the other direction, you end
That's
up in
yeah.
a just deep in farmlands or something like that. I don't know. But it would this would still apply to mangroves mud. You pick it up, you squeeze it. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. It just means a little bit something different because why you're trying to grab onto mud in the first place. But sand, you might have more of a reason to because sand is pretty cool. But if you grip it too tight, you try to possess it, you end up with less of it.
Yeah, the only situation where you might just pick up some mangrove mud is when you do blow out that jandal, which is a famous old situation here in
Yeah.
Aotearoa. Go off wandering deep into the mangroves, you got your jandals on, and then the mud takes hold of that jandal, so it's all gone. Blowing jandals, sand through the fingertips. It's the niche cache, and this is the niche cast. We did have some news this morning via Stevie Cousins, Aotearoa basketball extraordinaire, the one and only Julius Halaifonua is entering the NCAA college ranks. And this is interesting because he seems like the next up Aotearoa basketballer to possibly enter the NBA. What do you know about Julius Halaifonua and his entry into college basketball?
Yeah, he seems to have been visiting around the shop and getting a bunch of different sort of recruitment pitches sent his way. He's ended up agreeing with Georgetown, which Georgetown up until this year, they've actually just changed coaches, but up until this year, the last like 7 or 8 years, they were coached by Julius Erving, New York Knicks legend, who initially did quite well with them, and the last couple of seasons it looked like they were quite terrible, like single digit win tallies. So that's why he no longer coaches them. I don't know who the new coach is, but that's a that's a program in a little bit of a transition, therefore, moving on from a head coach, and that's not necessarily a bad time for a guy, an international prospect like Julius Halaifonua to be popping up and that kind of thing. They won a national title during the 80s, and that during the 80s they were one of the powerhouse kind of men's basketball teams. They haven't been as good recently. They've missed a few. They haven't been to the national tournament for a couple of years, but they are a team that's like they might not be a current powerhouse, but they're still a big school who have the potential to get back to that. Reminds me a little bit of they didn't have the what do you call, like the pedigree, the former achievements of this, but similar situation to the kind of school like with Shelley Sledger-Walker going to Washington State, where it was a team that wasn't used to making national tournaments, had done so in the past, certainly hadn't won. They still haven't after a few years of it being there, they still haven't won a national tournament game. But she got to join them at a time when they were potentially on the way back up, and took them to some pretty famous years there, and including winning a Pac-12 championship, where she was player of the tournament. So if Julius Halaifonua can repeat even some of what Charlie Sledger-Walker's done there, then that would be pretty astounding. But yeah, it seems like a good fit. It's the type of school where like you're not going to. This isn't like who was it? It was Ty Wynyard, wasn't it? Who went to Kentucky, I think it was, and then it was too big of a school. There were too many recruits. Wasn't getting game time, wasn't given the opportunity to develop like he would have liked to. Halaifonua is not going to a major contending school, but he is going to the type of school where he could turn up, play big minutes, and hopefully improve them. And he is a guy who, he's the best bet we've got to get an NBA player since Steven Adams. And he plays in the same position as Steven Adams, also got, Polynesian heritage like Steven Adams. He's as tall as Steven Adams. He might even end up being taller than him. I think he's 17 or 18 now. He's bordering on 7 foot if he's not already there. He has played for the Tall Blacks very briefly. He got a little cameo in some, I think it was Asia Cup qualifiers earlier this year. He's mostly been around at the NBA's Global Academy in Canberra, where the Australian edition of the Global Academy, but they have players from all over the Asian Confederation, including also Oscar Goodman, who was the star player at the Under-17 World Cup recently for New Zealand. So yeah, Halaifonua just an incredible prospect and incredible talent, and we now know what the next couple years are going to look like for him as he tries to progress this whole basketball thing, hopefully all the way into the NBA. And yeah, we'll see what that looks like. Charlie Sledger-Walker, since I mentioned her, I'll just repeat again that she has transferred. She was going to go to the WNBA. She was going to try get drafted, but then she got injured. And so because she was going to miss the whole WNBA season anyway, she's like, well, I might as well just go back and have a college season and then join the WNBA next year without having missed any more than she would have. So, but she's not going back to Washington State. Her last year, she's transferred to UCLA. So she's gone from yeah, it's not Seattle, but it's up around Seattle, like the top Pacific Northwest, and Washington State is around where she was. She's moving to sunny California, so straight line downwards, but to a much sunnier climate and a bit of a bigger school. They were a team that they beat. She played a lot against in the Pac-12 previously, but you know, there's she's had good performances against them. She knows them very well, but also they are on the whole a bigger school that will have more resources and blah blah blah. So sweet as that. Big season from her, and she'll hopefully crack the WNBA. Big season from Julius Halaifonua, and I don't expect him to be a one and done type player, but he's working towards the NBA himself. These are just further examples of great Kiwi basketball and achievements and milestones that we're seeing.
Julius Halaifonua, via a quick Google search, is Tongan. So Stephen Adams is Tongan, Halaifonua is Tongan. So something about them Tongan basketballers in Aotearoa doing the biggest things around the world, specifically the nation of world champion teams in a domestic competition.
And that might sound like a frivolous connection, but that's legitimately going to be something that American scouts are like, oh, he's just like Stephen Adams. Like, that's actually going to count in his favor pretty significantly.
Yeah, but he might only have one or two siblings and no Olympic medals, so the story
That's
might
true.
be
They might, yeah,
a little less funky. Righto. We are going to chat about the Warriors. And we're going to chat about the Warriors now because some stuff has happened, but also this might be the time where we start to talk less about the Warriors. Because as we know, and as I will remind everyone, and I feel like this is an annual reminder, New Zealand Warriors are not New Zealand Rugby League. So we cover the Warriors pretty intently, pretty heartily, until it's not worth it. And we've got so much Aotearoa sporting angles to tap in with that at some point it just becomes like, well, what else are we going to say? The Warriors aren't that good. We're going to keep flogging a dead horse, as they like to say. So this, unless they kind of turn something around, this is my checkpoint where I'm more interested in the Kiwi NRL angle and the NRLWahine angle as well, because that competition has started up and there's a lot of great rugby league stuff from Aotearoa separate to the Warriors. Anyone who hasn't really been tracking rugby league, you may have missed that the Kiwis had multiple wins under Michael Maguire with no players from the Warriors. The Warriors defeat that's a Freudian slip there. The Kiwis defeated Australia last year with one player from the Warriors. We've got Kiwi NRL juniors at every NRL club. And the Kiwi Ferns, guess what they did last year? They defeated Australia with no players from the Warriors. So the Kiwis and the Kiwi Ferns defeated Australia last year with a combined one player from the Warriors. Now, obviously, we know that the Warriors are returning to NRLW next season, so they didn't have a team last season. And that's the point. The Women's Rugby League is firing on all cylinders without a Warriors women's team. So we need to get that that's separated, because this is where I divert into Kiwi NRLWahine, and just fall away from the Warriors stuff a wee bit, because it's just not that interesting once they start to settle into the pattern that has existed throughout our lifetimes. Before we get into that though, speaking of the newsletter, last Friday, we talked about this on the subscriber podcast, and then I went pretty deep on the Friday newsletter, describing all the options the Warriors have to replace Dylan Walker. And then on the Monday newsletter, there was a little paragraph that seems logical, but I'm now just like, maybe I just like took the bait a wee bit, because I wrote in the newsletter yesterday that it's very hard for the Warriors to win with two players who don't really want to be there. Like, Fonua Blake's already stated that he wants to go back to Australia. That's all been organised. Shout out to Adam Fonua Blake. He's maintained a professional standard. Nothing, no discredit. This is just about, it's very hard to win in the NRL if you've got one player who doesn't want to be there. Now, news came through last Thursday that Dylan Walker wants to go back to Australia. So I covered the middle forward options available to the Warriors in the Friday newsletter. And then on the Monday newsletter, I said the Warriors have two players who don't want to be there. That makes it very difficult to win. And then Monday night, a New Zealand punter comes out and says, nothing to see here. Dylan Walker's going to see out his contract with the Warriors. So I just want to get, just a bit of self-reflection. I might have gone a bit too deep, a bit too quickly into an Aussie punter saying that Dylan Walker wants to leave and go back to Australia. Might have took the bait there. And I'm just a bit of self-reflection. Okay, chill out, ease up. But that got me thinking how NRL media is the least trustworthy of all sports. Like, any NRL punter in Australia, I don't think they've got a handy record of straight facts. It's a lot of jibber jabber coming out of Australian media punda. That's a mix of pundits and punter that I just made up.
Pundits and punter, yeah.
The old punders. The Aussie punders, gonna roll with it. The Aussie punders, you can't trust them. Whether it's, you know, throw up your favorite name, throw up your favorite character on your favorite channel, they're all weirdos. They all make shit up. They're all just, you know, they're all just kind of chatting shit. And I don't know who to believe. But my observation as someone deep in the rugby league mangroves is that NRL punders are not trustworthy. I'll save a whole spiel about like which sports media punders are trustworthy and not. Like, we don't need to go down that route, but I'll just say the NRL, not trustworthy at all.
I would say, as a general rule, the more money involved in the sport, the less trustworthy the media is around it as well. Like, this.
Yeah, but you say that, but then if Shams or Woj are saying something, that's trustworthy because it's probably going to happen. Now we can debate.
Yeah, I guess you got trustworthy people within the, although they've got the same thing going on as a lot of, like, because I find the biggest thing with the NRL people is that everything feels so compromised. Like, everyone's, if someone's got a rumor, it's because an agent told them, and they're doing self-serving, how do I promote this agent type stuff. That is how it all works, and probably never on a higher level than what you get with Shams and Watch, who
but
their connections define everything. They even shout out the agents and their things, like, and their tweets about signings and whatever. But
that's how you know it's a fact. You know it's going to happen.
Well, you know it's a fact if it's so-and-so is signing with something. You don't know if it's a fact if it's so-and-so is coming off the end of his contract and might want to leave or whatever. Like, when you get into the speculative bargaining stuff.
If Woj says Dylan Walker wants to go back to Australia, it's going to happen, regardless of how we feel about Woj. But if an Aussie NRL punter says something, I don't trust it. And it can be any one of the Aussie punders. I don't trust it at all. Now, I also don't necessarily trust the New Zealand punters. Because why would the Warriors say, yeah, Dylan Walker's going to go back to Australia just after the 3 to 4 days we've had? That would be terrible. You lose at Mount Smart against the Eels. Shaun Johnson retires. Yeah, we're going to let Dylan Walker just gap it. That's a terrible news cycle for the Warriors. So, of course...
Jazz Tavanga going to the Dragons as well, allegedly. Yeah.
There you go. So, of course, the Warriors, who have a direct connection with the New Zealand punters, they're going to say, nah, nothing to see here. So the Aussies, not trustworthy at all, but I'm not necessarily full-on trusting the New Zealand angle as well. But that's just my own self-reflection. It's got nothing to really do with what we're talking about here. Because the Warriors did lose to the Eels at Mount Smart, and it was a bit of a stinker, pretty crappy. And I was initially kind of going to package it with some Broncos observations. Because I feel like everything the Broncos are experiencing is what the Warriors are experiencing. And I wrote about this in the Monday newsletter. You look at the blame pie for the Warriors. Well, yeah, some of the youngsters had a few errors against the Eels. But all season we've seen the veterans do silly stuff and lose games. So you can look, and that's just a very small example because the blame pie features a lot of slices. You can go through every pocket of the Warriors and be like, that didn't work. Andrew Webster's coaching style, his playing style, not really working this season. Selections are a bit goofy. There's this dynamic between the veterans and the youngsters. It's all there, just like the Broncos. A lot of the Broncos' problems are just like the Broncos and the Warriors right now, they are a mirror of each other. So first and foremost, there's no one area of the Warriors right now that you can just say that's the biggest issue. Because whether it's in-game or just stuff around the Warriors, everything's just not quite working right now. And that's all right. That's just where they're at. But initially, I was going to use the Broncos as the mirror to the Warriors. Until Shaun Johnson announced his retirement. And Shaun Johnson's the mirror to the Warriors. Because this brings an end to the Shaun Johnson era of Warriors Rugby League. And I was thinking about the Shaun Johnson era. Which era came before that? I think it might have been the Simon Mannering era. Which era came before that? It might have been the Stacey Jones era. Somewhere in between Shaun Johnson's first stint with the Warriors and his second stint, there was a bit of a flutter with the Roger Tuivasa-Sheck era. But the last 13 years has been the Shaun Johnson era of the Warriors. And obviously there's, other notable characters. This is just a very general era chat. If I look at the Warriors, Shaun Johnson debut 2011. Pretty exciting. They make the grand final. We're thinking, holy guacamole, the Warriors are on. But that was the first grand final for like 10 years. I think 2022 was the grand final year initially. Then they crack it 2011. Shaun Johnson's debut season. He doesn't carry them, but he's a significant feature of a team that goes to the grand final. What happens the next season? They finish 14th. Then they finish 11th. Then they finish 9th, 13th, 10th, 13th. Then they make the finals in 2018. Holy guacamole, the Warriors are kind of good again. Then they finish 13th after Shaun Johnson's gone. And then they go 13th in 2019. Then they go 10th, 12th, 15th. And they finish 4th. was Shaun Johnson's best season. If you're catching the pattern here, there's an understandable dip in the 2024 season. So I think for a lot of us, Shaun Johnson is a favourite. Like, we'll never forget the memories Shaun Johnson made. And I don't care for the, like, best Warriors ever, best New Zealand. Like, that chat doesn't interest me at all. Shaun Johnson's a great player. He delivered a lot of fun memories for us as rugby league fans. And none of this is a... because why would I take shots at Shaun Johnson when he's just announced his retirement? That just seems a bit nasty, a bit mean, right? What I'm saying here is that the Shaun Johnson era and Shaun Johnson's career is a mirror to the Warriors. Because the Shaun Johnson peaks were followed by mediocrity. The Warriors' peaks were followed by mediocrity. So it's not really any surprise what we're dealing with right now in 2024 if you are a Warriors fan who has been working through decades of just like, ugh. And I think that is the emotional point that the Warriors are hitting their fans with. But when you go back through the Shaun Johnson era, no one should be surprised about what is happening right now. But like 2011, when you think you're going to have sustained success, because you do make a grand final, that isn't a guarantee that you're going to win the next season. So when you look at the bigger picture, the Warriors are just in the same pattern they have always been. Have a good year. And to be honest, this pattern right now, have a good year, 4 years of mediocrity, have a good year. 4 years of mediocrity, have a good year. 4 years of mediocrity, have a good year. That's where the Warriors are at. I will explain why I'm kind of optimistic about this next phase. Well, I'll say it right now, I think we're moving into the James Fisher-Harris era. And call me deranged, call me a Warriors tragic. I think the James Fisher-Harris era might be better than any previous era. But it's very interesting how, in thinking of how to set this up, I went from the Broncos mirroring the Warriors, and I think there are a lot of similarities between those two organizations. And I think that should just tell Warriors fans to just chill out. Like, the NRL is a very difficult competition. And as you're seeing with your Dragons, you don't necessarily need to have the most talent in this very competitive competition. You can just rally, you can just play with high energy and be successful, but there's no guarantees you're going to be good next season. Just because you had a good year last year. Like, the Broncos are telling that story, Eels are telling that story, Rabbitohs are telling that story, the Warriors are telling that story, so that should inform us about what kind of competition the NRL is. The craziest thing in all of this, and again, this is just a fact, and it's a fact I don't understand. So I'm not presenting it with any of my tinge of positive or negative. This is Shaun Johnson's worst season for winning percentage. He has won 23% of his games. And the only seasons of Shaun Johnson's career where he won less than 35% of his games were 2022 on 24% and 2024 on 23%. That is quintessential Warriors. You got a low, you got a pretty big high, because like Shaun Johnson's win percentage goes 24%, 68%, 23%. That is volatile. That's ups and downs. That is the roller coaster every Warriors fan knows very well and also despises. And that is the roller coaster that all the stereotypical perspectives from the outside, especially Australia, judge the Warriors on. So in a very strange way, this chapter of Warriors Rugby League under Andrew Webster, it brings an end to the Shaun Johnson era, but ultimately it's just normal Warriors. The success last year was normal Warriors because they have made grand finals. They have had good years. The thing about the Warriors is that every good year where everyone's like, yeah, this is the start of something, maybe 2 good years. That's all we want. Just 2 good years, 3 good years. That's all we need. Every Warriors fan enjoys a good season with the hope, expectation that it's going to lead to another good season. But it never really does, unfortunately. That's the tale of Shaun Johnson's career at the Warriors. That is the tale of Warriors' existence. And unfortunately for Shaun Johnson, like, his last 2 years sum that up. And that's just how it is.
Yeah, I was going to say it. I was tempted to jump in there and say it takes 4 good years to make a car run, but then I didn't have the drum kit to accentuate my joke, so I didn't bother.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, there you go. That was kind of jarring, just seeing that, like, the times that the Warriors have made the playoffs, and then there's just a massive dip immediately after that. And that's the NRL for you, and to some extent, it's really hard to be a team who backs up year after year after year. And I'm thinking, who actually does that? Like, which teams would you think of that do make the finals pretty much every season? It's Melbourne, Roosters, should say, Penrith Panthers, obviously in this current era. But then I'm looking at, and then I thought a little bit more specifically. Penrith Panthers have won 3 titles in a row. There's an example of what it looks like, ultimate consistency. The 3 teams they've beaten in the grand finals are the South Sydney Rabbitohs in 2021, Parramatta Eels 2022, Brisbane Broncos 2023. Where are those 3 teams on the table in 2024? Let's see, 14th, 15th, and 16th out of 17 teams. So there are worse examples than the Warriors, but those teams have actually had well, they've all had championship seasons once upon a time. So wild competition for that. I mean, the Canberra Raiders made the final in 2019 as well. They're also potentially not. They're more in the hunt than some of these other teams for finals. They're in 10th right now, but there's no guarantee that they will make the cut either. So it's like this does happen beyond the Warriors, but the Warriors have this pattern that's gone over a couple of decades with this. And yeah, the fact it's common enough means I don't think you can just say, like, this is a inbuilt Warriors thing, but there is obviously something of, like, yeah, you sort of have to ask, why have they not been able to repeat things? Why have they not been able to find consistency? And that's the question Andrew Webster's got to figure out. And that does happen. Like, you do get the odd second season syndrome there, where, like, a coach or a star player, I think Shaun Johnson might have even had this as a player once upon a time, bursts onto the scene, and then teams figure you out a little bit, and you're a little bit less effective from that, and you have to adapt your game to have a long, consistent run after that. And Johnson did that. Johnson adapted his game pretty fantastically. You think of how he burst on the scene as this touch rugby playing, sidestepping phenom, and then developed into one of the best kickers in the competition. Like, that wasn't what his game looked like when he was first playing. And Webster can do the same thing as a coach, but that's the test. It's like, you were great out of the gates. Other people figured you out a little bit. Other teams, the scout reports, they got an idea of it. Now you adapt. Like, the next year is the definitive one. It's like, how do you respond to that? And we'll see what that looks like, I suppose.
Shaun Johnson's played 8, 9, 10, 11 years with the Warriors. How many of those years did he have more than 50% wins? 11 years.
4.
Correct. Sean Johnson has tackled, not a perfect stat, but just a bit of trivia. He has tackled over 89% efficiency. Let's make it 88.5% efficiency in one season. Can you guess which season that was?
Surely it was last season.
Definitely was last season. Last season was also, if it was his first year over 88.5% efficiency, it was definitely his first year over 90% efficiency, 90.82% efficiency. Now it's 82.5% efficiency, which is better than his first 3 years, so he definitely improved. But that's just telling the story of the Warriors and the career arc of Sean Johnson, which is intertwined with the Warriors, because as I'm saying, this is now ending, and it was the Sean Johnson era. The thing here, though, as I get into a bit of optimism, it's always important to try and find a bit of optimism, and I think there's a decent case for a bit of Warriors optimism. This 2-year cycle for the Warriors, making the finals, I think they made the semi-final last year, fantastic year. Now you've got whatever's happening this year, which is, whatever it is. That's not unique in the Warriors' life cycle. We've seen it before. As much as it hurts, as we're saying, it happens on a cyclical basis. I don't think it's unique in the NRL right now either, as we've talked about. The Broncos are in a pretty similar spot, and the reason I was using the Broncos as a mirror is because a lot of the issues are the same. Like, I'm watching Keanu Kinney be better than Reece Walsh, which is absolutely amazing because I love it. Northcote Jr. from Rosmini College. And I'm feeling just a straight up and down Keanu Kinney greater than Reece Walsh. Like, you go through the Broncos and there's young players who are doing what most young players do and struggling to thrive in the consistent grind of NRL footy. Like, the only 2 players that I can think of who have been really solid, consistent performers early in their careers are Leo Thompson and Matthew Tomoko. You have the Fiangai brothers. You got Tyrell Sloan. We won't talk about the criminals, but you got Tyrell Sloan, who has been dropped a few times. The Fiangai twins, they have been in and out of first grade. It is very difficult as a young player, whether you're Dean Mariner, Reece Walsh, Ezra Mam, Xavier Willison, Mariner, Willison from Aotearoa, Keanu Kinney's from Aotearoa, Tomoko's from Aotearoa, Leo Thompson's from Aotearoa as well. It's very hard for those young players to perform and win week in, week out in the NRL. It's very difficult, and whether it's injuries, Broncos are battling injuries. Payne Haas has just got an injury. Ezra Mam's just got an injury. There's some off-field dramas happening around different players. You look at the Warriors. They started their season with Sean Johnson and Luke Metcalf as the main halves combination. Then for a lot of the season, it was Tamaita Martin and Chanel Harris-Tavita. Like, everywhere you look in the roster, something's a bit wonky. Something's a bit off. And so you can't look at the Broncos and say this is their biggest issue. Some people do that. Some of the punders. And it's like, the complacency after a grand final. Like, I find it very difficult in these instances, in these examples, to pinpoint one area and say that's where it's gone wrong. Because you watch the Warriors play the Eels, Mitchell Barnett's the best forward for the Warriors all season, and he's getting smashed by the Eels forward pack. Big proponents of the Warriors kick return meters. I'm saying they got the best back three running the footy. This is their best back three combination all season. Eels stopped that. And they stopped it with Dejan Arce from Christchurch, big left boot. Did a Kiwi NRL spotlight on him, so I did enjoy seeing Dejan Arce just pumping that left foot down the ground, pin the Warriors back in their own end, big kick chase. Great performance from the Eels. But you go through every little aspect of the Warriors footy, and it's just a bit wonky. You go through every aspect of the Broncos footy. Recruitment, they let Herbie Farnworth go. Thomas Flegler's gone. Kurt Capewell goes to the Warriors. Now, against the Tigers, Kurt Capewell had like 3 penalties in a row. But there's so much like wonkiness that you can't just look at one player, one aspect of the footy, and say this is the issue. If you have so many things going wrong, teams like the Bulldogs, the Titans, the Dragons, they're going to sort their shit out and they're on the up. This is the NRL. The optimism now. This is where things get a bit funky for me. Because I'm looking at the Warriors and I'm like, if the Warriors just came out and said, we're in this for the long term, we are strictly a development club, we're going to take our time in building an efficient and effective pathway. I think a lot of people would look at this situation differently. Instead, the Warriors did very well to win a lot last season, and everyone thought that was the status quo. But you compare the Warriors to the Bulldogs were very deliberate in the messaging of what was happening. And yeah, we did have a little giggle at the Bulldogs last season when the Warriors beat them twice and everything was cruisy. But the Bulldogs took their time and they were very deliberate in their messaging to set up this season. And you compare the Warriors to the Bulldogs, the Warriors straight away had success with Andrew Webster. Then everyone adjusts to what the Warriors and Webster are doing. Very difficult to maintain that success. The Bulldogs took their time. It's hard to adapt to what the Bulldogs are playing under Seraldo last season when they're not winning. You don't need to worry about adapting to their strengths. But I don't think this is anything intentional, though. The Bulldogs struggled last year to set up this season. The Warriors were successful last year, and that set up this season. Same way the Broncos were very successful last season, and that set up a dip this season. Because the Broncos haven't been a top 4 team consistently over the last 5 years. They had the Seabowl dramas, all sorts of shenanigans going on there. So if you have a random good season, I think it's pretty damn difficult to back that up. But I'm waffling around.
Which the Bulldogs will have to try to do next year as well. They have to back up what they've done this year. They maybe this is a slow and steady progress into being a steady top 8 team, or maybe they're just having the year this year that the Warriors had last year and the Broncos had last year.
Exactly. Same with the Dragons. Same with the Titans.
Yeah.
Every
if the Titans is big year, they don't even make the top 8.
I think it's every team except for the Panthers, Storm, and Roosters. They're going to have a good year, and somehow you got to back it up. Otherwise, Broncos, Warriors, Rabbitohs, Eels, and we just don't worry about the Tigers because they're the Tigers. The Warriors are a development club right now under the 2 Andys, Andrew Webster, Andrew McFadden. Andrew Webster, long career, spent time with the Warriors. McFadden spent time with the Warriors before this tenure. Webster's coming out of the Panthers. He knows the setup. McFadden did a lot of time at the Raiders. They're a good development club. My observation is that the Warriors are in a transition phase, and the success last year wasn't necessarily part of the plan, maybe. Like, we're going to build this thing up to be successful over a long period of time. We'll never complain about what happened last season, but it did switch the focus of what the Warriors were doing. But this is where I get my optimism from, is because I believe the two Andys and the whole Warriors organization are building out a sustainable development pipeline, and they are building a roster to fuel that sustainability. I don't think success last year was on the radar. They would have been like, yeah, if we can make the finals, that'll be a good year. We'll keep building, keep progressing. Now we've got every junior team possible. The players are going to start coming through, so we can sort out our salary cap, because players on their first or second contracts are much cheaper. So we'll sort out our salary cap that way. We'll have an endless pipeline of talent coming through. Everything's going to be honka-dory. That's still in place, but they had a good year last season, stinker this season. So that's kind of it's like an iceberg, right? Like the tip of the iceberg. Great year last year, mediocre year this year. Below the water, I think you still have that long-term development club system being built and set up at the Warriors. What are the Warriors doing in New South Wales Cup? They've been a good New South Wales Cup team for 2 years in a row, with their New South Wales Cup team full of young players. Like, the Jersey Flegg team's not that great this year, but that's their first year. What did they do in under 17 Harold Matthews? They won that competition. SG Ball was solid. All those things are being put in place, but and especially like the young players weren't so good against the Eels, right? So that's kind of adding some tinge to the perception of the Warriors pipeline in a very short-term bubble. But again, the senior players have been kind of crap all season. It was the senior forwards who got dominated by the Eels as well. There's a lot going on there, so you can't point the blame in any one direction. But as I thought about it, I was just like, I'm pretty confident the Warriors, the things they are doing, all suggest they are trying to be a development club. And I think that's going to frame how they recruit in the future. I don't think they're going to do big recruitment moves to replace Sean Johnson. I don't even know if they're going to do big recruitment moves if Dylan Walker does leave. James Fisher-Harris fell on their lap to replace Adam Whenua-Blake. But none of that really, I don't think any of that comforts the feelings Warriors fans are having right now. But you look at the players who are going to step up, like the halves situation with Sean Johnson departing. Well, you've got three halves there right now. Luke Metcalf, Tamari Martin, Chanel Harris-Tavita. You've got like 4 or 5 Aussie halves in the pipeline, and you've got Jet Cleary coming next season. Like, just that halves situation tells you the story of the direction the Warriors are heading. They are here to develop players and to supply the NRL squad with players from within their system. But it takes, we've seen it with the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs don't have any Kiwi NRL players in their team. But every level of the Bulldogs pipeline is full of Kiwi NRL players because that's part of their recruitment and development strategy. But it's going to take a year or two for that to really be seen across the whole Bulldog system. And what has happened over the last 2 years is all the young Warriors on the fringe of NRL have played NRL. So when I talk through that, when I think about that, and I'm thinking, okay, we'll just give Leotaua a bit of NRL footy, Graham Telfer a bit more NRL footy, Jacob Laban's going to be playing a little bit more, Maiu is going to be playing a bit more. Now we've got Leka Halasima, he's playing NRL footy a little bit more. Sifakul has played a bit of NRL footy. With that mindset, I don't think raging success in the first 2 years was really part of the plan. I think the plan was to build a development organization to take the Warriors forward, and all of that's in place as Shaun Johnson bows out and as Fisher Harris enters the equation.
Yeah, which another way of looking at that is by saying the big ups of last year and the big downs of this year don't really affect the trajectory of the organization, because you've experienced both extremes, but you also nothing changes. Like it's not even about it leveling out. It's not even about finding a balance between those things. It's the fact is what's going on beneath the NRL level, which is to service the NRL level in the future, but not quite yet. That stuff happens unabated. Like nothing has. In fact, it's just like you're a year closer to those guys being steady NRL presences. And like you said, a lot of them this year have gotten NRL debuts or have started to get in a little bit more consistent game time. And that doesn't mean you're wandering into the NRL and winning games from day one. That's very rarely how it happens. But it does take you closer to that stage where you can be a contributing player on a winning team. And I mean, I don't know, something that was, I wouldn't say bugged me, but something that sort of lingered in my head about just thinking back on this Warriors season and the season before that is like, I'm not sure how many players they have who are like, and I'm curious what you think about this. Like, I'm not sure how many players they have who are in their primes right now. Like, you got dudes like Shaun Johnson's last year was his best season, but that was his best season as a 30-plus-year-old on the other side of like a few relatively serious injuries during his career. And he was already talking about, I don't know if I want to keep playing. We'll see. He's come back this year, hasn't been able to back that up, had to play through injuries, and clearly like that was a tipping point. He might, if they had this season last season, he might not have even played this year. He might have just retired at that point. But because they were successful, because they had something to build off in the immediate future, he might have thought, yeah, let's have one more swing. And then it didn't work out in a number of ways. I think probably the battling injury fact is probably more than anything, because that has just got to suck. Like when you're already looking at the finish line and you're thinking, man, it hurts. Like it physically hurts to keep trying to do this thing and we're not even getting results for it. I can understand that. But yeah, like Mitch Barnett feels like someone who's playing the best stuff of his career right now, who's roundabout peaking. You can make a case for a few guys who are like not key influential players, but I'm not sure how many other Chanzador Clockstar I would put in that category. But like, couldn't say it about Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. He's won a Dally M before. He's not doing that this season. I don't know how many dudes there actually are who you would say are in their prime, ready to lead a team to consistent top four finishes over the next couple of years. Like there was Toyo Harris is right in that same Shaun Johnson kind of category. He's already basically retired with, I don't know if he's said it officially, but he's basically retired from international stuff for a couple of years now. He's been injured all year, just like playing through injuries, same as Johnson, and then not playing because of injuries, same as Johnson. And you at the same time you do have these young players pushing through, but they're not pushing through into a team where it's like established, we're winning. You just have to come in and do your little 10 to 30-minute job, and you can slowly evolve at this level. They're being thrust into fairly big positions because there's kind of this open gap in the middle, because a lot of their best players are either role players or are older players who are not really at their peak. Like who would you say is in that category of like peak of their career Warriors players right now in 2024?
Barnett is definitely one,
Yep.
and that's about it.
I'd still put Nickel Klokstad there, but I don't know
Yeah,
how
yeah, and
many
you could
others
make a
you would.
case that like Tamari Martin's in a peak,
Yeah.
maybe Tavanga, but he's gone. So it is like when you think of the turnover, that's another interesting thing. You raised a very interesting point I do want to touch on, but like Josh Curran leaves last year, but Bailey Sirinen also left, and he's just a solid NRL performer who could he was playing dummy half off the bench. He was playing edge forward. He was playing lock. Just a solid NRL experience kind of second, third contract, fourth, fifth season, knows what the NRL is all about. This season, they're going to lose Fanua Blake, Tavanga, Sean Johnson, maybe Dylan Walker. So when you're thinking about the turnover in the roster, you can kind of get a sense. Sean Johnson retired, so he's not in this category. And they want to keep Dylan Walker by all accounts of the Aotearoa punders. You can kind of get a sense of how... Because Andrew Webster last year, he came in and he said, we're just going to work with what we have. I want all of you guys to take part in the season. I'm not here to overhaul the roster. But after 2 seasons, we can see the overhauling of the roster taking place. Because a bunch of players are leaving. But your point about the prime years, there's not many, so that's good from you. But also, one of the big storylines this season has been the battle between the veterans and the youngsters. Because every fan has their own opinions about the veterans and the youngsters. And you can see Andrew Webster, he doesn't know what to do. He's selecting a whole bunch of veterans for a period. Now you've got a bunch of youngsters for a period. None of that suggests players in their prime. Because he's selecting veterans over youngsters. He's selecting youngsters over veterans. Sometimes the youngsters are playing better than the veterans. The Warriors are winning with their B team in a couple of games. And that's another factor of the season, is just the highs and the lows. This season have been a bit ridiculous with the wins over the Dolphins, the Panthers, and then you have the triple sixer against the Titans. All that shit was pretty crazy. But I don't know if Andrew Webster's like, yeah, I'm working with players in their prime. Because his selections don't suggest that at all. His selections all season have been a bit confusing. One player you might say is in their prime is Bunty Afoa. You know, he's an NRL prop who's played 5 or 6 seasons. He's not playing this season. So I think Andrew Webster's selections, week to week, month to month, tell that story of there's not a lot of players in their prime. But you can see where they're heading. I still think that's a positive direction, positive motion. The Titans. I want to shout out the Titans because they're awesome, and what a few, like, well, it was the game against the Tigers, and I was like, Keanu Kinney's really fun, he's awesome. Talked a lot about Keanu Kinney over the last 18 months. Then they lose to the Tigers, and I was like, I just want to see Keanu Kinney, Kieran Foran, Aaron Clark win. They've won 5 out of their last 6 games. And Keanu Kinney is quite small, and he averages 200 meters a game. That's crazy. And I still think Nickel Klokstad is better suited to International Rugby League, just with his efforts and his defense and his kind of mana at the fullback position. Keanu Kinney's awesome though, and he might be the fullback for the Kiwis. Foran's been awesome. Aaron Clark deserves to be in that Kiwis squad as well, just his vigour as a small forward with the Titans, because he's also added a lot under Des Hasler. How about Des Hasler? Big dog. What else do we have floating around the NRL? You got any Dragons had a win over the Storm? What'd you think of? Did you pay any attention to the chin, Alec McDonald?
No, because I was double screening with Olympics and also Dragons at the same time. So I didn't have, didn't have the attention span to put my scouts glasses on, but weird game because I thought when the Storm scored first, okay, well, here comes a 50-pointer, and then they didn't really do that again, which was pretty nuts. But Dragons seem to be doing all right at the moment, and it's fun. And that was the first time they've beaten the Storm for like 300 years in Melbourne, something like that. I might be off by a couple of centuries on that, but it felt it was something along those lines. And every other team except the Titans around them on the table lost this week. So it was kind of fantastic for the Dragons. But yeah, I mean they're finding a bit of consistency with a couple of Kiwi dudes into the team now on a regular basis, which is cool. I don't know whatever happened to Manu Brown. He sort of popped up, they squeezed him straight back in, and he's hardly played since. But Christian Tuipulotu seems to have locked down a wing position, which is pretty great, and he's not the only one in there either.
The top 8 is a bit light on Kiwi NRL talent. Obviously, Storm, Panthers, Roosters, Big Dogs. Sharks always have a few. Bulldogs don't have any. Cowboys only really have Griffin Neame. Sea Eagles, bit of Sipley, bit of Josh Alloway. Dragons, Tuipulotu, Ben Murdoch-Masila. So there's a bit of Kiwi NRL talent there, but not a whole lot. But the Titans are just one of the most fun teams in the NRL. And like Keanu Kinney is genuinely outperformed Reece Walsh in that game, which was very fun to watch. But as always, the lesson here is just to not be too harsh in judging the young players, I reckon. Because those young Broncos, playing in the NRL is a lot to deal with. It's very difficult to maintain 8 out of 10 performances week in, week out in the NRL, let alone if you're a youngster. So, like, Dean Mariner has had a few flashy moments this season. He's also, he made a bunch of errors against the Warriors at Mount Smart Stadium. Willisine has had a few big games. He's probably the next up big bopper for the Aotearoa Kiwis. But he's still up and down a bit, let alone the Aussie youngsters that the Broncos have as well. I am fascinated by what's happening in the NRLW. 2 teams who are waiting on their Black Fern Sevens players haven't won a game yet. Dragons are 0-2. They're waiting for Tyler King. The Broncos are 0-2. They're waiting for Stacey Walker. I know what to expect from Tyler King because she was a Kiwi Ferns half last year. She's going to add a bit of class to the Dragons, bit of experience, veteran nous. I know what position she's going to play. It's all there. I think the Dragons will be better with Tyler King. Who knows what Stacey Walker is going to do with the Broncos? Don't even know what position she's going to play. It's just funny that the two teams who don't have a win in the NRLW, I think there's 3 teams actually, but they are 2 of the 3. Yeah, obviously the West Tigers haven't won a game because that's what they do. They're waiting on Black Fern Sevens players. So it's just an interesting wrinkle. Top of the table, teams with 2 wins and no losses. Titans, Sharks, and Knights. I'm going to do a spotlight, an NRLWahine spotlight on Georgia Hale. Because she made 43 tackles at 100% against the Tigers. Last year, she made 501 tackles at 98.8%, and she was the only player with over 340 tackles. This year, she's made 89 tackles at 97.8%, and she's the only player with over 75 tackles. So Georgia Hale is making the most tackles in the last 2 seasons by a significant margin, and she doesn't miss. Interestingly, last season was her first season averaging over 100 meters. So she's kind of developed from a tackle bot into a really good middle forward. She's always been a good middle forward, but it was kind of more passing and tackling dependent. Well, she went from 106 meters per game last season up to 141 meters per game this season. So now she's just genuinely the best 13 in the NRLW. Shout out to her. The Titans also have Niall Williams-Guthrie and Haley J. Ormond-Monsell. Sharks, they've got Anessa Biddle, the one and only. She, against the Eels, a win. She had 14 runs for 154 meters, 11 meters per run. Last season, Anessa Biddle, in her first season of NRLW footy, coming straight out of Otara Scorpions, Counties Manukau Rugby League. She was second for post-contact meters total, but she was first for average per game, 77.5 PCM per game. This season, she's already first in post-contact meters, and she's also first in average post-contact meters per game. She went from 77.5 post-contact meters per game last year up to 89.9 PCM this season. The Sharks also have Brooke Anderson, who's basically an Aussie who played for the Kiwi Ferns, and Pia Tapsell, former Black Fern. She hasn't played for the Sharks yet, but she's around the system. And then we've got the Knights. The Knights didn't have Isabella Waterman or Grace Kukutai in their team. They did have Waterman. I think they had a win over the Raiders, maybe. Waterman was on the bench, but she didn't play. Grace Kukutai wasn't in the team. They got Shanice Parker, Abigail Roach, Laishon Albert-Jones, and Nita Maynard. Tanika Willison from the Black Ferns 7. She's going to join the Knights as well. Thing here, though, is about Laishon Albert-Jones. She hasn't lost a game in the NRLW. She went 10-0 last season. Now they're 2-0 this season. She averaged 88 meters per game last season with 87% tackling. Now she's up to 108 meters per game and 91.8% tackling. Lots of great stuff happening from the Aotearoa perspective in NRLW and NRL. Like the funkiest teams in the NRL have a lot of Kiwi NRL talent, except for the Bulldogs. But the thing to say about the Bulldogs is, as I said before, massive contingent of Kiwi NRL juniors in their pipeline. Okay, now I feel like I've got that out off my chest. I've got it all out of there. We'll be obviously tracking rugby league from the Aotearoa perspective in the coming weeks. Just I don't like talking too much negative shit about the Warriors because the pattern there is obvious. We can point at all the holes, but it's very like any bit of advice you offer hasn't worked in the past. So like, at some stage, what's the point? Especially when Aotearoa Rugby League is so epic that I can just hammer home how awesome Aotearoa Rugby League is when the Warriors aren't necessarily on fire. Although, observing a lot of the coverage and yarns from the punders, they keep referring to the big wave of rugby league in Aotearoa last year because of Up the Waz. That's why I'm like, nah, New Zealand Rugby League is separate to the Warriors. The Kiwis and Kiwi Ferns beat Australia with no Warriors, one Warrior. Like this is... You can't judge New Zealand Rugby League on the Warriors. I'll reaffirm that idea. One other thing, it will be very interesting to see what the next home crowd is like because they've already said it's a sellout. So if you've come out and celebrated your sellout, but there's empty seats. That's a bit goofy. The Olympics.
Well, they've all been sellouts, haven't they? But the crowd sizes seem to fluctuate by like up to what, like 2,000 maybe, potentially more, like from the lowest home crowd to the highest home crowd. So not everyone who buys a ticket turns up necessarily. Like there's been some games in pouring rain. There've been some games where like they're coming off a terrible result or whatever. So that's why like that's just going to happen. But and also maybe I don't exactly know how they count those. There might be some thing about like how many tickets they give away, like for example to local schools or clubs or things like that, and whether that's incorporated, I'm not sure, and etc. etc. But yeah, that will be interesting. It will be interesting to see if they have a sellout that's like 3,000 seats under capacity.
The sellout stuff is all propaganda. Same like
Effectively, yeah.
You look at any ratings reports or anything, contracts, right? Like the big contracts. They're going to say this is a X amount of contract deal, but it's not. Because you get into the nitty gritty, you look at the bonuses, the structure, and all the different ways it's evaluated. That deal is not worth the stated amount. Same with the sellouts. Like it's a great thing to say, but there's sometimes empty seats. So it's just a bit of propaganda that we don't really need to pay attention to. Let's get into some Olympics though. I did like that Sam Tanner Munawave start line of his, was it the 1500? I also saw the triathlon
Don't ask how
team.
he went in the race though.
The triathlon relay team had a collective Munawave, like a quartet Munawave, which was pretty cool.
I'll have to try to find that. I didn't see that.
They every team got introduced, and you come out of the little doorway, whatever it is, and every team did their own little thing. The Aussies were like, "Yeah, come on," and the Kiwis just did a Munawave, and I was like, that sums up the two countries right there.
Yeah, the triathlon relay didn't go great either, though. I didn't even realize that they started it earlier than I thought they would, because nothing else starts at like 6 p.m. New Zealand time. And then by the time I turned it on, realized that I missed the start, we were already out of contention because Hayden Wild had crashed and apparently taken out the hometown team in the process. So yeah, so it goes. It's the perilous nature of the Olympics sometimes.
What's been any highlights for you over the last few days?
Well, the pole vault last night was good fun. The women's pole vault, where Eliza McCartney was one of the 11 contenders out of 30 competitors to clear the 455 mark, which meant that they have to have a minimum of 12 in the final. They only had 11 who cleared that mark, so those 11 just went straight through, even though there was still 2 steps below the automatic qualifying mark. But then in order to get it up to a minimum of 12, they're like, well, what do we do now? I guess we just take everyone down the count back who, because you miss 3 in a row, you're out, is how these things work. So who are the people who only miss 3 and have a clearance at the lower mark? And there were 9 people. So they brought back all 9 of them to go through to the final. So the qualification only took 10 of the 30 people out. But one of the 10 who got eliminated was the British favorite, like expected to come in. And when Eliza McCartney had a big comeback earlier this year at the World Indoors, got silver, I think it was Molly, what's her name, Molly Cordrig, I think it is, who beat her to the gold. But she skipped the first 2 rounds. Did that thing where it's like, no, I don't need to do that. I'll come in a little higher up, and then missed all 3 at the higher up, which means she's eliminated. Where if she'd jumped over the one below that, she'd have gone through, as did Imogen Eris and Olivia McTaggart, who both thought they'd been eliminated, then got told, actually, on countback, you're going through to the Olympic final.
Have we been in the medals? Everyone's concerned about the medals. What are we doing with the medals?
Got a couple more this morning. There was old mate behind me on the video, Finn Butcher. They kept calling him the Butcher in the... It's like the canoe slalom, but it's a race. It's like 4 of them that go out at once. I don't know what the title is, but he won gold. There was an English guy who was supposed to win the thing, and then the other three kind of got tangled up at the start because they just like this this sport is nuts. Like they start in a little platform and then it just drops and they fall like 2 meters into the water and then you just got to cycle through all the paddle your way through all the hurdles and whatnot. And he just got out to a fantastic start and then held it. As the race only lasts like 60 seconds or something, and he just burst out and won himself a gold medal. We also got a silver in the women's team pursuits, I think it's called. One of the cycling ones anyway. Track cycling started this morning. We got a silver medal there where I think they broke the world record in the semis, but then England, well, Great Britain broke the world record back immediately and went on to win the actual finals. So fair play to them, but that's another silver medal. So I think we're up to 9 overall. We'd had a couple slow days there. Like the athletics hadn't started very well. I don't know how many of them would have been medal hopefuls. Even I don't really think Tom Walsh was he might have got a medal, but I don't think he was expect him to get a medal like he had been the last couple of Olympics. He's not been in the same level of form recently, and kind of showed why with an injury. Sam Tanner, it turned out, was not carrying an injury, but had been injured most of the year. Where I don't think he would have been a 1500-meter medalist, but like stranger things have happened. However, because of it was like an Achilles complaint or something like that. I can't remember. Took him out for several months at the start of the year, which meant that his conditioning just wasn't where it needed to be to win his race. But he did, as you say, throw up a pretty mean Mana wave to start with. So he made the most of the Olympics, even though he performance-wise will feel pretty gutted about the timing of it. And there's a few stories like that over the last few days, but every time you get worried about it, we do the old national pastime of just check the medals per capita, and suddenly things look great. Where we're not first because there's a few like Dominica and St. Lucia. St. Lucia had the women's 100-meter champion, Julian Alfred was her name, won the women's 100 meters, their first ever medal, and it's one of the biggest spotlight medals at the entire Olympics, the first ever medal for that country. So there's a few of those, like even Fiji as well. It's not their first medal, but it's the only event they medal in. And the rugby sevens, I think they got a silver medal this time. So there's a few of these countries that have like less than 1 million people, but in terms of countries with multiple medals, it's New Zealand and then it's Australia in the medals per capita stuff. So it's a little bit cringy how much we go on about medals per capita, but also there is a reason for that. It's like because it does put it into a bit more of a fair perspective of the resources and the sheer weight of population that other nations are dealing with when they scoop up all the medals. And then you look and see like actually countries our size, no one else wins the amount of medals we do across the breadth of events that we do. And there's plenty more to come. This track cycling just started. That pole vault one looked all right. Eliza McCartney looks in good form. Like there's the canoe, there's the Lisa Carrington's got 4 events in the canoe stuff, and she's not alone there. There's a few couple others along with. Like there's plenty of good stuff still to follow in what is, I guess, the last week of the Olympics. I'm not sure how long we got to go left, but a few more days of goodness yet.
That sums up why Aotearoa is the best sporting in the nation in the world. KG for KG, per capita, we're out here, winning medals and just performing at the highest level across a variety of sports. Which, again, the Kiwis and Kiwi ferns are beating Australia despite the disparity in population and resource, and Black Caps pretty good at cricket. White ferns, they're okay at cricket, but they're up at a good level. That's what we do. All Whites football ferns, they're alright as well. Tall Blacks, tall ferns, doing the stuff. The football realms of the niche cache have transitioned out of the Olympics and into National League glory, where dogs are front and centre or back and centre back.
Offside position, I think.
Well, they're the defenders because they stopped the goal.
Yeah, or you could argue they were attackers because they were from the home team. There was Eastern Suburbs on attack at home at Medill's farm. They might have been invaders, but also You could, interfering with the goalkeeper's line of sight from an offside position. That's normally something VAR will step in and say, no, sir, you can't have that.
What else off the top of your head? We've had a dog pooing on the field.
Same
Like,
ground, by the way.
bit of an issue there.
That's they don't call it as one of the commentators said. I think it was Rachel Head and Sophia Garcia were the two commentators. It just happened to be a FIFA Plus televised game. They're both from the women's team of Eastern Suburbs. As Rachel Head said, they don't call it like they call it Medul's Farm for a reason. You know, it's full of animals.
They were saying that literally moments before dogs ran onto the field. So that was
I think the dog must have already been on the field at that point. I just didn't realize it was going to interfere with play because Eastern Suburbs went on a counter attack. So yeah, but it's like
But what
not a
else?
rare
Like,
occurrence at that ground.
we've had the dog pooing on the field. We've had the graffiti containers in the background. Like, what are some other National League shenanigans that we need to be reminded of?
Um,
I,
yeah, I don't
You wrote in
know.
the newsletter how the dog pooing on the field a few seasons ago, someone had to pick that poo up, so that's another little wrinkle
Yeah.
there.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. There's always the old broadcasting ones where you're seeing like names being spelt wrong in the team graphics and stuff. They're better at that than they used to be. Or a goal gets scored during a replay. This happened last year where the commentator is working from somewhere else, doesn't realize the goal has been scored and keeps continuing without like acknowledging that. Um, those are more like try fix these things rather than like just it's dog running on the field is shouldn't happen. It's unfortunate from a technical perspective if you're an official, but also it's funny. It's funny and it's endearing, and that's the kind of like cool grassroots connective stuff that we do love about the National League. But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to say like players playing ineligible, but just think about I don't know on a sporting perspective, a goalkeeper scoring 120th minute extra time goal to send the National Cup final, the Chatham Cup last year, into a penalty shootout, where as the goalkeeper he then didn't make enough saves and they lost, but still. That was Max Tommy for Melville United last year. Like for some reason, one springs into mind where the Wellington Phoenix had an Australian dude from in their first team who they're like, yeah, go get some minutes for the reserve team. We'll chuck you on for like the last half hour or something. And he got two yellow cards in the same. It was Brandon Wilson, I think it was Brandon or Brendan Wilson. He was from Perth. I think he went back to Perth. Um, got two yellow cards in the same move a few years ago where he like pulls a guy's shirt back. Ref says advantage, play on. He runs up and hacks him down. He got booked for both of those things in the same move. There's two separate yellow cards and he got sent off. And he was just trying to get like match fitness. There's hundreds of those little moments, but I struggle to pick too many out on the top of my head because it all blends together into the wonderful pot of gumbo that is the National League.
That game did, correct me if I'm wrong, but it did feature a bunch of Auckland FC players.
Yeah,
And
and
there
could have featured more.
there was
Because
a
the Eastern
Auckland
Suburbs.
there was an Auckland FC trial practice game a few days earlier. So can you like
Yeah,
catch us up on some of the going ons there with Auckland FC? And
yeah,
and
that's it.
sorry,
Because
sorry for jabbering. The Wellington Phoenix are playing their Aussie Cup game
yes,
coming up as a
tonight.
Wednesday, Tuesday night. So a bit of Wellington Phoenix thrown in there as well. Auckland FC, are they not in the Aussie Cup yet?
No, I was wondering about that, and then I remembered you sort of have to qualify for the Aussie Cup. So because they didn't play last season, there's no like, oh, you finished top 10 in the A League, you go straight through to the round of 32, or if you finish below that, I think you have to go play the earlier round before that. But obviously, Auckland FC didn't exist, so there's no like basis for them to have qualified from. So they will join next season, I suppose. And yeah, they did play a game against not against Eastern Suburbs, against Auckland United. at Keith Park last Wednesday. Apparently 2,500 people turned up there in the pouring rain to have a peek at them. So that's pretty exciting, the level of interest that's gauging. And they had a few trailers on there, including Nico Boxall. People know him, fairly well established. He's played for the All Whites. Michael Boxall's younger brother. He's had a long career in Scandinavia, mostly in Finland. Dejan
Arcee?
something. Not RC, but Dejan Patel or something like that. I can't remember. He's like 16 or something. I actually haven't really seen him play much at all, hence I can't remember his name. And Ralph Rutherford, who was the guy who scored the disallowed dog goal. Those three guys were trailing for Auckland FC in that game, and Auckland FC already had, let me think, Francis de Vries, Joe Knowles, who else? We had Lewis Toomey and Finn McKinlay, who all were affiliated playing for Eastern Suburbs before signing with Auckland FC, so no longer Eastern Suburbs players, but there are four players that they signed from Eastern Suburbs, and then they have three more on trial, so someone knows someone there. Like this. It's I would have imagined Auckland City would be more likely to, and they have had a few, like Liam Gillian and Cam Howison have come from Auckland City to Auckland FC, so it's not like they're ignoring the dominant team of the last few years. But I would, we'll see, because from what I've gathered, they're trialing quite a few players. Like they're bringing a lot of, they're short on, their squad isn't built yet, so there's plenty of room at training. They're bringing in during the week quite a lot of Northern League players to just see what they're up to. So Eastern Suburbs seems to be a happy hunting ground, although Eastern Suburbs, there's a reason for that as well, as the Eastern Suburbs are the type of club that has already recruited these guys themselves. Like, a couple of those guys came through Eastern Suburbs Academy, but like Toomey's from Napier, I think, and has played for Hawke's Bay and has played for the Wellington Phoenix Academy, and Nico Boxall's obviously come back from overseas, as has Francis de Vries, who's from Canterbury originally. So like these guys are not Eastern Suburbs juniors. Joe Knowles, I think, might be, or at least he's an Auckland football junior who hasn't been overseas yet. But there's Eastern Suburbs recruited these guys in the same way that Auckland FC is recruiting them. So there's probably a pattern there. Maybe explains that a little bit, why there is that crossover.
It's Dejuan Naidu.
Naidu, that's it. Dejan Naidu.
But not
So
not necessarily Dejan, but a Dejuan.
It's more like Dejuan or
Yeah.
yeah.
But it's probably
Which is
not
weird. It's
Dejuan.
like a Spanish / Indian or Fijian combination of names. It's not one I've come across before, but I look forward to seeing what he's up to. If not for Auckland FC, then hopefully for Eastern Suburbs in the National League at the end of the year. Sounds like a plan one way or another.
What's a concise summary of your Auckland FC like vibe check thoughts?
I love the way they're putting their squad together. I love the emphasis on connecting with the clubs around the Northern League and bringing in players and signing a lot of those players and looking to bring in a lot of the best young Kiwi talent. The emphasis on signing a lot of New Zealanders up front to make a statement about that. I like that they've chipped in with a couple of very experienced A-League players as well, like Jake Brimmer most of all, but then also bringing in Hiroki Sakai as their first import, someone who's played like 70 odd times for Japan at multiple World Cups and at Olympics. He was part of the Japanese team that knocked New Zealand out of the Olympics in 2021 when it was in Tokyo, but he didn't play that game. He was suspended because he got 2 yellow cards in the group stage. So the one game he missed was the one game against the team where little did he know, his future teammate Michael Veld was in goal for the Ollie Whites that day. So funny how these things all wrap around in circles. Yeah, I think as far as putting a new franchise together in this kind of environment, marketplace, whatever, I'm struggling to find fault with what they've done so far. Whether that turns into like a successful team or not, that's down to coaching and down to whether their talent selection is up to task. But the players they've signed so far are mostly the guys who were known to be like the best guys around. So I find all of that hugely exciting and hugely encouraging, the way that they're going together. But it's early days yet, so we'll see how it we'll see how it unfolds from here.
What's the most important thing about this Aussie Cup game for the, like, obviously it's being played tonight, so maybe not a preview of the game, but my hunch, based on what you've relayed to me over the years, Aussie Cup, lots of youngsters. So is there, for Phoenix fans who might listen to this after the game, do you have any kind of insights on how the Phoenix team might look? Any interesting players to watch out for? What, because this is where the Phoenix use their whole squad, full on depth check. Here's who we have in the organization. Go play some football. It's not the A-League. It's like a warm-up to the A-League, but it's also kind of important. And I imagine they're playing some random team in Australia.
They're playing South Melbourne, who they are a random team in Australia, but they're one of the better NPL teams. So there would be some upset potential based on past, like, sort of how, I don't know, just the quality of that team versus the Phoenix very early in preseason with what's likely to be a very young squad. They will have to be careful about how that goes. If they do get knocked out, that's a bummer, but it's not anything that should affect how their season progresses, because I remember last season they actually played quite crap in the Aussie Cup. They needed extra time to get past a lower ranked team who were worse than, sort of in terms of how their season was going at that point. They're a team that was doing worse than South Melbourne are this year, and they needed extra time to beat them, and then looked pretty poor against, I think it was Melbourne City in the next round and losing. So they didn't look very good then. They didn't really look like they had much cohesion or tactical balance. But of course, that was a few weeks into preseason. They had a couple more months before the actual stuff began. And once the actual stuff began, they were fantastic. Like it turned into their best ever A-League season, and they looked completely cohesive and like they had a very clear plan of how they're trying to play their football. So don't expect too much from these games, but it is a good opportunity, especially for the young dudes, to get some minutes, to show that they should be around that first team, to audition for scholarship contracts as well as a big factor here. And Chiefy has said that there will be 6 academy players in the match day squad, which I tried to work out in the newsletter what that might look like, and it's a little bit frisky. Even after he said, like, because it's early days in preseason. There might be some people carrying injuries. There's also been more disruption than usual because some of the guys went to the Nations Cup. Some of the guys went to the Oceania Under-19s recently. Some of them went to the Olympics just like last week. How many of those guys will be included? I don't know. Like, Sam Sutton played a lot of minutes at those Olympics. He might well be rested for this game. He's already said that Alex Rufer hasn't traveled. I think it's too soon for Paulo Retre, who's only just signed. And guys like Marco Rojas and Costa Barbarouses are likely to be on very limited minutes, maybe Scott Wooden as well. So there's a few of these ones where it's like, I don't know exactly what the team's going to look like. He's already hinted they want to play a bit differently, particularly in a way to get Marco Rojas into the most prominence possible, which again, this is what he said last. He didn't come in saying, we want to play a 4-3-3 formation with blah, blah, blah. He's what Giancarlo Italiano said coming into the Phoenix head coach role was, we want to play in a way that best suits the players that we have. And that turned into what it turned into. I think it's too soon to see what that's going to look like, especially if Marco Rojas isn't even playing big minutes in this game. But we should see, I expect we'll see him back as first game in yellow and black for a very long time. So that'll be cool. But mostly the focus is on which academy players might pop up and which scholarship players and whatnot. And yeah, I think Albie Kelly-Hield is the only guy that they've said is going to start because he's the only senior affiliated goalkeeper around. Dublin Boone from the reserve team is going to be his backup, and beyond that, we'll see what that looks like. But there's a good level of talent in that Phoenix Academy system, and the club is proving over recent years they know how to nurture that talent into A-League quality players. And this is part of that process, is getting first team football, but in a lesser competition. So we'll have a good look at that. That'll be live streamed on YouTube at, I think it's a 9:30 p.m. kickoff.
Also had a few goals on the Flying Kiwis beat. I'm not sure if there's been much player movement that you want to touch on, but I saw Elijah Just score a nice goal. We had Bill Tuiloma. He scored a goal for the seconds in Charlotte, like their second team. So that's a bit weird, but shout out to him. There was Fred de Jong scored a goal in South Africa, and
Bridget Jong's son, Andre.
Andre de Jong, oh, sheepers creepers,
Close
and
enough.
Jackie Hand. Did she score a goal?
No. I don't know what Jackie Hand's up to. I'm waiting for her to sign with a new club. Who else did score? There was more than that. George Stanger? I don't actually know how you pronounce his name. I'll have to look that up. I was looking in pronunciations on the Olympic website, list them on the athlete profiles for a lot of them, not for everyone, but for a lot of them, where it's just the athlete, someone's held a microphone up to them and said, say your name slow, like normally, and then say it slowly. So like might have to send the Portland Timbers the one of Finn Sermon going Finn, Sermon, Finn, Sir, man. So I was listening to a few of those to see if there's anyone who I was pronouncing their names wrong the whole time, which there wasn't really. But there's a couple in the football ferns where it's like Malia Steinmetz instead of Malia. She goes by Malia, so we'll try to keep that one in mind. Grace Jali rather than Jale or jail or any other. It's just Jali, like the E pronounced as an E. I've heard people say Annalie Longo, but she said Annalie Longo, so some of that stuff is interesting. I don't know. George Stanger wasn't in the Olympic team though, but he did. He was. Was he in the one before that? I'm not sure if he was. He was in the under-20 World Cup alongside Nando Pinecker once upon a time, but. Yeah, he scored a goal for Ayr United in the Scottish Championship, their first goal of the season. Bill Tuiloma getting one. Bill Tuiloma might be part of that like upcoming wave of like second wave of transfers. We sort of had the first wave of transfers before the Olympics. I'm picking a second wave of transfers coming after it, hopefully headlined by India Page Riley's proposed move to Crystal Palace, which hasn't been confirmed yet, but has been reported, so it's happening at some stage. And yeah, there's quite a few free agents who were at the Olympics. Sarpreet Singh is a big one. Jackie Hand is another big one. A few of these players, we'll see what that looks like. Bill Tuiloma might be part of that as well because I see Charlotte FC. He already isn't playing much for them. He's only played 3 MLS games all season. Plus, he got about a minute the other day in the Leagues Cup game coming on in stoppage time. Probably why he and a few others were sent to play for the reserve team, which is not really a reserve team. It's more like a youth affiliate club, but close enough. It's the same thing. Same purpose anyway. And he did pop up with a 98th minute headed equalizer. So it was prime Bill Tuiloma stuff. But they are likely, it sounds like it's already a done deal, in fact, to sign American international centre back Tim Ream, who's currently at Fulham. Not any longer. I guess he saw Matt Dibley-Diaz go out on loan and was like, I can't stay here anymore. I need the dibs around me to give me energy or something. I don't know. But if they're signing another centre back, that's knocking Bill Tuiloma even further down the pecking order, and they have suggested if someone comes in, someone will go out. So hopefully that's Bill Tuiloma, because I don't want to see him festering in the reserves any longer. Like, he's an MLS level player. He's proven that at Portland. He hasn't been able to prove that at Charlotte, who played him in just the wrong way the whole time. You take a dude whose best attribute as a defender is the fact that he can take free kicks and he can get up and win headers in both penalty areas, and then you ask him to just be like a ball playing centre back who's not allowed over the halfway line. It's stupid. Like, why did you trade for a guy if you're going to ask him to play in a way that's not how he plays? But hopefully he can escape from that, maybe to another MLS team. Maybe, I don't even, at this point, I would even allow him to go to an A-League club. I wouldn't be upset if that happened, because I just want to see Bill Tuiloma playing football and scoring more goals as a defender as he does so well. But yeah, he might be part of that. He might be part of that second wave of transfer market movement. But I think the most significant goal of the round was definitely Elijah Just, which was a beautiful goal. Which is not just how good the finish was, a little shimmy to create space and draw in. Like, he had 3 defenders, get them on their get them on their heels just so they couldn't pounce and block that shot. Whip it top corner. It's not just that. He also, at the start of the move, he begins the counter-attack. He wins the interception in his own half. He plays the ball up the line to the winger, who then cuts it back to him. Like, this is lovely stuff from Eli Just, who himself has had some transfer speculation off the bench the first 2 games. This is second tier in Denmark, so it would be nice if he were playing for a higher-up club. But you work with what you got. He signed with them as a top-tier club, and they got relegated. So, you know, they had an opportunity. The transfer window is still open, so something else might come of that. He was close to moving to Gothenburg in Sweden last last transfer window. It's slightly after last transfer window because the seasons didn't overlap, which is why he wasn't sold because they didn't have time. They didn't have the ability to sign a replacement for him. So he is still there at AC Horsens, and maybe he'll stay there. And if he stays there, hopefully plenty more goals and assists follow where this came from because he did also set up a stoppage time winner, I think, the week before off the bench, which is like a large part of why he was promoted. I think someone else got injured, but it's part of why he got promoted to the starting lineup. Scored the only goal in a 1-0 win. Fantastic goal. We want to see key All Whites attackers at the highest level possible, but also playing as much as possible and scoring and assisting. And Eli Justice had a very good start to his season in the Danish second division, where if either that's going to promote him into a transfer somewhere else, or it's just momentum to take into, well, if I'm in this level, I'm going to dominate this level, get this team promoted, and do it that way, do it the old-fashioned way. So great work from Eli Just. That was a beautiful goal.
You alluded to the India Page Riley joining Crystal Palace. Is that likely to happen, or is that untrustworthy football media reporting?
That was the Guardian, so that's about as trustworthy as it gets, short of being confirmed on the BBC. So that's the type of rumor where it's not even a rumor. If they're saying it, it's basically done. And if it changes, it's because something's changed since then, not because it wasn't true at the time. There's always complications and things, but I expect that'll happen. And also, she's still under contract at PSV Eindhoven. She's not a free agent like a few of these other players. So that'll be a transfer fee. I don't think it'll be a huge transfer fee, but there is not many Kiwi women who have ever been sold for a transfer fee. I think, depending on whether you want to count allocation money, which I think you can for Ellie Riley's move from Bayern Munich to Orlando Pride, not so much for her second trade, but they must have paid Bayern something. They can't be giving them allocation NWSL money because they're not an NWSL club, so that wouldn't have made sense. But it might have come out of that fund, is why that would count. So I think that is a transfer fee. Obviously, Macy Fraser going to Utah from the Wellington Phoenix, that was a transfer fee. That was an A-League record transfer fee. Rebecca Stott also, weirdly, when she moved back to the A-League, they paid a nominal fee of some description to it's always undisclosed. We've bought so-and-so for an undisclosed fee from such and such. Melbourne City actually paid an undisclosed fee to get Rebecca Stott back from Brighton. It wasn't when she moved to Brighton, it's when she came back from Brighton, which was interesting. Then they obviously made her captain and key player and all them good things. They had a reason why they did that. But as far as I know, I think those are the only three instances, because there are a lot of short-term contracts and often players will just be released rather than negotiating moves that way. But we're starting to see more longer term contracts, and so we're starting to see more transfer fees in women's football. And as far as I know, I think Indy Riley would be only the fourth instance for a Kiwi player to ever attract a transfer fee.
So that would suggest that it's a step up to join Crystal Palace from PSV Eindhoven, and that's where
it definitely is.
That's where Ali Riley has been. Is she still going to be there?
Ellie Riley has played in the WSL briefly for Chelsea, but it's where Rhea Percival, other ex-football firms, co-captain,
that's the one. Gotcha.
Where Rhea Percival was last season on loan. No longer on loan, obviously, because the loan expires at the end of the year, but she has been released from Spurs, and so I'm waiting, checking these things over and over. Like, was she going to sign? What's happening? Like, where are we going with this? She said towards the end of last season she would be happy to stay at Crystal Palace on a permanent basis. I still think that's probably likely to happen. It's just that they haven't really announced anyone. Like they announced a few re-signings from players who were their own free agents at the start of last month and haven't announced anything since. And I even went and tried to see if I could find like training photos. There's Rhea Percival there maybe, and they just haven't announced it because they want to make these things clearer closer to the start of the actual season, which is later than the men's stuff. I think the Premier League starts in a couple of weeks, but the Women's Super League in England doesn't start for about another month or something like that. It's in September. So it's an extra 4 weeks for the women based on where those clubs are in their preseason now versus where, say, like, Ben Old is in his preseason, or some of these other, um, some of the blokes, which is partly because of the presence of the Olympics, and the Olympics being a senior competition for the women. So those football firms players, not as much of a rush to find their next gig, which is part of it's also why I think that's feeding into the second wave of transfers that's coming, is the fact that a lot of them have held off. I am also, though, I will say, very curious where Sarpreet Singh ends up, because there've been a couple rumors about interest in a few different countries, but England seems to be a high up opportunity for him, which it should be pretty interesting. I don't know how he'd go in that level, because England is like Germany, where it's quite physical and fast and direct. And I wondered if maybe somewhere slower, more transitionally or positionally balanced, like Belgium or Netherlands, might be a destination for him. But he's a free agent. He's got options. It sounds like he's got options in a number of clubs, which is good, because I didn't want to see a guy like Sarpreet Singh stranded. As we want him to have as many offers on the table as possible, because it reflects on the fact that all this good stuff has come from the fact that he did play for Bayern Munich for a little bit, so he's got that reputation. But also, like, all his good football scouting video of recent years has come from All Whites and Ollie Whites. So that's good to know, because it means that those guys are watching those games.
Are you meaning England in terms of the Prem or the second tier?
It wouldn't be Premier League, I don't think. Would likely be second tier, or maybe even third tier, where, like, if he goes third tier, this Buckingham's team club was one of the ones that were mentioned. So there's an obvious connection there with his old under 20s / Phoenix coach. So that would actually be quite a cool thing. That would be third tier in England, but it would also be third tier with a club that are trying to get promoted, like a team that should be winning a lot, which I think also suits him, because he's played for consecutive teams in the German second division that have been relegated. And when teams are losing, they get negative, they get conservative, they bring in extra defenders. They don't want that flashy winger. They don't want that number 10 who can, drop into spaces and pick. They just want someone who can get in there and crunch people and win tackles and win headers and stuff. So that's counted against him in the past. I want to see him on a winning team where he gets a little bit more room to flourish.
Beauty. That is the Niche Cast. Hope you enjoyed it. We will get back to writing some Aotearoa sporting things. Flying Kiwis will be on the website by the time the podcast is live. You can read about Georgia Hale's excellence and everything else you might want to find on our website, thenichecache.com. Otherwise, big up yourself, love yourself. Kia kaha, stay beautiful, church.
Here we go.